In the beginning, before memory, before the first whisper of wind brushed across an empty expanse, there was nothing. No sky stretched above, no ground lay beneath. No stars glimmered in distant darkness, for there was no darkness to hold them, and no light to cast upon them. There was only the vast, yawning void, an infinite silence that the ancient Norse called Ginnungagap. This gulf existed beyond the limits of imagination, a realm without form or boundary, a deep and immeasurable stillness suspended between the forces that had not yet come into being. But even within this emptiness, the seeds of creation waited. To the far north lay Niflheim, a place of frost, of biting winds, of frozen rivers that twisted through the emptiness like veins of ice. Its breath was cold, heavy with mist and sharp with the sting of winter. To the south, far beyond mortal reach, burned Muspelheim, a realm of raging flames, molten rivers, and fiery storms. It was the home of fire giants and the embodiment of primal heat. Between these two extremes lay Ginnungagap, silent and waiting for the spark that would stir creation into motion. From Niflheim flowed the ancient rivers known as the Olivigar, and as they extended into the void, they carried with them frost and sharp shards of ice. Over countless ages, the icy breath of Niflheim crept deeper into the gap, forming layers upon layers of rime. Meanwhile, Muspelheim's fiery winds pushed outward as well, spilling sparks and waves of heat across the gulf. Eventually, these two cosmic forces met, and in that meeting lay the moment that would transform the void forever. When the heat of Muspelheim touched the frost of Niflheim, the ice did not simply melt. It awakened. Drops formed and fell, gathering and shaping themselves into the first living being that ever existed. Massive, ancient, and powerful, this being was Ymir, the primordial giant. He was not born as humans were, nor shaped by deliberate hands. He emerged as the natural consequence of creation itself, a being of immense size and strength, with a lineage tied directly to the clash of fire and ice. Ymir lived in the silence of Ginnungagap, drinking from the wells of melting frost. But he was not alone for long. As the frost continued to melt, another being emerged, a great cow named Audhumla. She was gentle and nurturing, her body rich with life-giving sustenance at a time when the universe was still raw and empty. From her great udders flowed 4 rivers of milk, and these streams became Ymir's nourishment, sustaining him as he roamed the early void. Audhumla herself fed from the salt-rimed stones that emerged from the frost. As she licked them, something remarkable happened. Over time, a shape began to form beneath her tongue. Slowly, over 3 days, a figure emerged from the ice. On the first day, a single hair appeared. On the second, a head took shape. And on the third, a whole being stood revealed. This was Buri, the first of the gods, tall, strong, and radiant with a vitality unlike any that existed before. Buri would become the ancestor of the Aesir gods, but the world was still young, and creation had only just begun to stir. Ymir, meanwhile, gave rise to giants, his sweat-forming beings from under his arms. From one arm came a man, from the other a woman, and from his legs came yet another being. These became the race of frost giants, the Jotnar, whose existence would one day challenge the gods themselves. The giants multiplied, spreading their massive forms throughout the growing worlds, a reminder that chaos and wildness were woven into the fabric of existence from its very beginning. As for Buri, he fathered a son named Bor, and Bor married a giantess named Bestla, who herself was a child of Ymir's lineage. From their union came 3 sons who would change the course of the cosmos forever. Their names were Odin, Vili, and Vili. Odin, the eldest, possessed a sharp mind and an insatiable hunger for knowledge and wisdom. Vili embodied will and determination, the inner fire that drives all creation. Vili represented sacredness and the power of divine order. Together, these 3 brothers would shape the universe in ways no one could yet imagine. Yet the world, as it existed then, was not suited for life as the gods envisioned. Ymir's offspring roamed freely, often clashing with the younger divine lineage. The giants were powerful, unpredictable, and chaotic in their nature, mirroring the raw elemental forces from which they had sprung. The gods understood that if they wished to build a world of structure and purpose, they would need to confront the chaos that Ymir embodied. A great decision lay before Odin and his brothers, one that would define the foundations of everything that followed. They resolved that creation must come from sacrifice, and that the raw force of chaos could be shaped only by confronting it directly. So, the three brothers rose to challenge Ymir himself. The battle that followed was unlike anything that had taken place before. Through strength, will, and divine purpose, the brothers overcame the primordial giant, and with his death came the materials of creation. Ymir's immense body became the earth, his blood the oceans, his bones the mountains, his teeth and broken fragments of bone became stones and cliffs. His skull, vast and heavy, was lifted high to form the sky, and his brains were cast into the air to create the clouds that drift across the heavens. His eyebrows were shaped into a protective barrier, forming Midgard, the world of humans, encircling it and shielding it from the giants who continued to roam at the edges of existence. From sparks that flew out of Muspelheim, Odin and his brothers placed stars in the sky, forming patterns and pathways that would guide travelers, gods, and mortals alike. They created the sun and moon, assigning them paths across the heavens. They gave them guardians as well, placing them under the care of beings who would ensure that day and night followed their appointed cycles. In this newly shaped world, the brothers saw that life was incomplete. The winds whispered through empty forests and along quiet shores. Rivers flowed through vast landscapes untouched by footsteps. The gods desired beings who could think, speak, feel, create, and worship. One day, while walking along the shore, Odin, Vili, and Vili found two fallen trees. One was ash, the other elm. They shaped these into forms that resembled themselves. Odin breathed life into them, Vili granted them will and consciousness, and Ve bestowed upon them senses, speech, and physical form. Thus were born Ask and Embla, the first humans. These two would populate Midgard, living beneath the protection of the gods but also subject to the challenges of a world shaped from the remnants of chaos. Their descendants would grow, learn, struggle, and triumph, becoming an integral part of the cosmic tapestry woven by divine hands. As the world expanded, so too did the realms beyond it. The gods established Asgard, their shining home in the heavens, connected to Midgard by the Bifrost, a shimmering rainbow bridge watched over by the vigilant Heimdall. The frost giants continued to inhabit Jotunheim, ever a reminder that order existed only because chaos had been conquered, but never fully destroyed. Other realms emerged as well, each with its own inhabitants and purpose. There was Vanaheim, home to the Vanir gods of fertility and prosperity. Alfheim, realm of the light elves. Svartalfheim, where dwarves crafted wonders from the bones of the earth. Helheim, where the dead who knew neither glory nor battle rested in the cold shadows. And beneath all these realms lay Niflheim's deepest pit, a place of punishment known as Nastrand. At the center of all existence grew the great world tree, Yggdrasil. Its branches reached into the heavens, its roots dug deep into the farthest realms, and its trunk supported the worlds that hung upon it. Yggdrasil teemed with life, both noble and troublesome. The wise eagle perched at its highest branches, watching the cosmos. Far below, the serpent Nidhogg gnawed at its roots, eager to bring destruction. A mischievous squirrel named Ratatosk ran endlessly up and down the trunk, spreading slander between eagle and serpent. 3 wise Norns tended the roots, shaping the fates of gods and men alike. And so the universe stood, vast and intricate, filled with gods, giants, humans, dwarves, and creatures of every nature. But at the heart of it all was Odin, whose leadership and relentless pursuit of wisdom shaped the destiny of gods and mortals. He sought knowledge with a passion unmatched by any being. His desire to understand the secrets of existence would drive him to sacrifices that few could endure. For Odin knew that the world, despite its beauty and structure, was bound by fate, and that even the gods could not escape the destiny woven for them. As creation settled and life began to thrive, Odin's thoughts often drifted toward the deeper mysteries of the cosmos. He knew the world was not eternal. He sensed that forces beyond comprehension were at work, shaping what had been and what was yet to come. The Norns whispered of cycles, of beginnings born from endings, of destruction paving the way for renewal. Odin understood that knowledge would be the key to preparing for the future, especially the dark storm that lay far ahead, an event that the gods called Ragnarok. But before that doom would one day arrive, the world had countless stories to unfold. Gods would rise to greatness, heroes would carve their names into legend, battles would test loyalties, oaths would be sworn and broken, and wisdom would be won at great cost. The Norse universe was alive, vibrant, and filled with a sense of both wonder and inevitability. The story of creation, born from the clash of opposites and shaped by sacrifice, echoed through every part of Norse life. It taught that the world itself was formed from conflict, that order was carved out of chaos, and that existence was a delicate balance. It is a tale that speaks deeply to the people who once lived in harsh northern landscapes, where winter's cruelty and summer's fleeting warmth reminded them daily of life's fragility and beauty. This is how it began, in a void of silence, with frost and fire, with a giant and a cow, with gods who dared to shape a world from the remnants of chaos. But this beginning was only the first step in a long and winding path that would lead through triumph and tragedy, wisdom and folly, love and betrayal. A path that would ultimately end where it began, in destruction and rebirth, as the cycles of the cosmos turned endlessly through ages. And so the tale continues, moving from the creation of the world to the rise of gods whose stories shaped the destinies of all beings who walked upon the earth or lived beyond it. At the center of these tales stands Odin, the All-Father, a figure both wise and weary, driven always by the desire to understand the fate that awaited the cosmos he helped create. A fate that would one day call upon gods and giants, monsters and men, to face each other in a final reckoning that would shake the foundations of Yggdrasil itself. But that time was far away, and many tales stood between the world's birth and its end. For now, the realms thrived, the gods watched over creation, and the echoes of Ginnungagap faded into memory as life in all its forms continued to grow and flourish across the 9 worlds. With the worlds now shaped and life beginning to stir across the realms, the gods turned their attention to building their own home, a place of beauty, strength, and order. They chose a region high above Midgard, where the sky stretched wide and clear, a realm that seemed suspended between the cosmic forces that governed all things. This place would become Asgard, the heart of divine power and the dwelling of the Aesir. Here, Odin and his brothers established their halls, grand and shining structures that stood as symbols of authority and guardianship. Among these halls would one day rise Valhalla, the great chamber of the honored dead, but in those early days, Asgard was new, its foundations fresh and its purpose still forming. The gods worked together, shaping their realm with craftsmanship, magic, and divine energy. They forged pathways that wound through the heavens, laid stones that shimmered with celestial light, and planted groves that breathed an air of eternal spring. Asgard stood as a beacon, a testament to the gods' determination to build a world unlike any other, a place untainted by the chaos that lingered beyond its borders. But even as Asgard grew, so did the other realms. Vanaheim, the home of the Vanir gods, existed in parallel with Asgard. The Vanir were a race of deities associated with fertility, prosperity, agriculture, and harmony. Their ways were different from those of the Aesir. While the Aesir valued strength, order, and the protection of the cosmos, the Vanir embraced natural cycles, the nurturing of life, and the balance between growth and decay. Though both pantheons wielded immense power, their philosophies were distinct, and these differences would soon bring them into conflict. It began with suspicion. Stories reached Asgard of a powerful seer among the Vanir who traveled between realms, spreading her gifts of prophecy and magic. She spoke to gods, giants, and mortals alike, teaching them spells and glimpses of fate. Her ability to stir hearts and minds unsettled the Aesir, who feared the influence she held. They believed that such power, if left unchecked, could spark unrest or challenge their authority. Driven by fear and misunderstanding, the Aesir seized the seer and sought to destroy her. 3 times they cast her into fire, and 3 times she emerged alive, unburned, transformed each time into a new form. She became known as Gulvig among the gods and Hyde among mortals, a figure of both magic and resilience. Her survival enraged the Aesir, who saw her endurance as a threat, while the Vanir viewed it as a grave injustice. Outrage grew between the two pantheons, and tensions hardened into hostility. The Vanir demanded reparations for the harm done to one of their own. When the Aesir refused, war erupted. The conflict between the two divine tribes became known as the First War of the Gods, a struggle that shook the foundations of the cosmos. It was a long and brutal war. The Aesir and Vanir clashed with weapons forged by dwarves, with spells sung by ancient voices, with storms and fires and forces unseen by mortal eyes. Battles were fought across realms and through the skies, each side refusing to yield. The Aesir, fierce and unrelenting, sought to overpower their foes through strength and strategy. The Vanir countered with magic, cunning, and the natural forces of the world itself. For ages, neither side gained a decisive advantage, and destruction threatened to unravel the order the gods had worked so hard to create. Over time, both pantheons began to understand that their conflict served no purpose. The war drained their power, weakened their realms, and sowed discord among the 9 worlds. Eventually, a truce was proposed, and both sides recognized the wisdom in ending their feud. To seal the peace, they exchanged hostages. The Vanir sent 3 of their most esteemed members to Asgard, Njord, god of the sea and prosperity, and his children Freyr and Freya, deities of fertility, harvest, love, and beauty. The Aesir, in turn, sent Honor, a god known for his leadership, and Mimir, renowned for his wisdom. This exchange marked the beginning of unity between the Aesir and Vanir. By sharing members of their pantheons, they blended their strengths, combining the disciplines of war and wisdom with the forces of growth and abundance. Freyr and Freya in particular became greatly revered among the Aesir, for their influence brought balance, prosperity, and joy to Asgard. Njord guided the seas and winds, ensuring safe travels and bountiful catches for seafarers and fishermen. Their presence enriched the divine hierarchy, weaving the two pantheons into a single harmonious family. However, not all went smoothly. Honor, though respected, lacked the decisive wisdom needed to lead without Mimir's guidance. Whenever Mimir was absent, Honor hesitated, unable to steer the Vanir with confidence. Feeling deceived, the Vanir retaliated by beheading Mimir and sending his head to Asgard. Odin, devastated yet determined, refused to lose the knowledge Mimir possessed. Through powerful magic, he preserved Mimir's head, enchanting it so that it lived on, able to speak and offer counsel. From that day forward, Odin kept Mimir's head close, drawing upon its wisdom in times of need. This grim event marked a turning point for Odin. His desire for knowledge deepened, transforming from a pursuit into an obsession. He sought understanding of the hidden truths of the cosmos, longing to penetrate the mysteries of fate, magic, and destiny that shaped the 9 worlds. His gaze turned increasingly toward the great world tree, Yggdrasil, whose roots and branches stretched into realms unseen. Beneath its mighty boughs lay secrets known only to the Norns and whispered only to those daring enough to seek them. Odin approached the well of Urd, where the Norns tended the roots and wove the fates of all beings. He asked for knowledge of the runes, symbols of immense magical power that shaped reality itself. But such wisdom could not be given freely. It required sacrifice, a deep offering that proved the seeker's worthiness. Odin understood this and accepted the cost without hesitation. He hung himself from the branches of Yggdrasil, piercing his side with his own spear. Suspended between life and death, he denied himself food and drink for 9 long nights. He stared into the abyss of existence, searching for meaning as the wind howled through the branches and the voices of the cosmos whispered through the void. His suffering was intense, his resolve unwavering. At the end of the 9th night, the runes revealed themselves to him, glowing with ancient power. Odin grasped them and fell from the tree, forever transformed by the knowledge he had gained. The runes became tools of immense potency, granting Odin mastery over magic, prophecy, and the shaping of destiny. His sacrifice not only deepened his wisdom but also solidified his role as the All-Father, the guardian of knowledge and the protector of the realms. Through the runes, Odin gained insight into the threads of fate that bound gods and mortals alike. Yet even with this wisdom, he could not escape the realization that the future held darkness, a final battle that would one day engulf the cosmos. But Odin was not the only god to pursue wisdom. He sought out Mimir's well, a place of profound knowledge hidden among the roots of Yggdrasil. When he reached it, Mimir demanded a heavy price, one of Odin's own eyes. Without hesitation, Odin plucked out his eye and dropped it into the well. In return, he drank from its waters, gaining visions that pierced deep into the mysteries of the universe. Though he walked away with diminished sight, his perception of the cosmic forces grew sharper than ever. These sacrifices shaped Odin into a god who understood both the beauty and fragility of creation. His wisdom was vast, but it carried the weight of foreknowledge, a burden he bore in silence as he watched the realms unfold around him. He knew that every triumph, every joy, and every moment of peace was part of a cycle that would one day lead to Ragnarok. With Odin's leadership, Asgard grew powerful. The gods built halls of incredible grandeur. Thor, Odin's mighty son, established his home in Bilskirnir, a hall of 540 rooms, all built for strength and celebration. Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, forged by dwarves who worked deep within Svartalfheim, became a symbol of protection and power. Its thunderous strikes echoed across the heavens, a warning to giants and monsters who threatened the peace of the realms. Loki, the trickster, also walked among the gods. Though he was born of giants, he was accepted into Asgard through charm, wit, and cunning. Loki was unpredictable, sometimes aiding the gods with cleverness and sometimes causing ruin through mischief. His presence brought chaos to the otherwise orderly halls of Asgard, but his role would become far more significant as the ages unfolded. Life in Asgard blended celebration with vigilance. The gods feasted in their golden halls, drank mead brewed from honey and magic, and watched over the 9 worlds with pride and responsibility. They rode their steeds across the sky, wielded weapons of extraordinary power, and shaped the fates of heroes and kings who lived in Midgard. Yet, for all their power, the gods remained bound to destiny. They were immortal in spirit but vulnerable to the forces that shaped the cosmos. The worlds were interconnected in ways both visible and unseen. Jotunheim, the land of giants, stood as a perpetual challenge to the gods. The giants embodied chaos, unpredictability, and the primal forces of nature. Their existence reminded the gods that balance was necessary, that order could not exist without the presence of its opposite. Many stories arose from the encounters between gods and giants, some filled with conflict, others with unexpected alliances. The dwarves, hidden deep within the mountains of Svartalfheim, crafted wonders that shaped the fate of the realms. Their creations, forged from stone, metal, and magic, possessed abilities unmatched by any other beings. From their forges came gifts such as Odin's spear Gungnir, Thor's hammer Mjolnir, and Freyr's ship Skidbladnir, which could fold into a pouch yet carry an army when unfurled. The elves of Alfheim brought light and beauty to the world. Though their interactions with the gods were rare and often mysterious, their presence added another layer of depth to the cosmic tapestry. They tended the forests, guided the stars, and brought moments of inspiration to mortals through dreams and visions. As the realms grew in complexity, so did the relationships between their inhabitants. Alliances formed, rivalries deepened, and legends began to weave through the fabric of time. Mortals looked to the gods for guidance, offering sacrifices and prayers at altars built near sacred groves, rivers, and stones. The gods, in turn, watched over humanity, guiding heroes and shaping destinies as they saw fit. But even as peace flourished in certain times, shadows lingered along the edges of creation. Prophecies whispered of events that would one day unravel the order the gods had built. These prophecies spoke of deceit, betrayal, monstrous births, and a final battle that would consume the world in fire and darkness before giving rise to a new age. The seeds of these events were already being planted, though the gods did not yet fully understand their significance. Loki's mischief would take a darker turn. Giants would grow bolder. Creatures of shadow would stir in depths unseen by divine eyes. The Norns continued their silent weaving, their hands shaping the destinies of gods and mortals alike, ensuring that what must come would come. And at the center of it all stood Odin, ever watchful, ever searching, ever preparing for the fate he knew could not be avoided. Loki's presence in Asgard brought moments of delight as well as deep unease. When he chose to help, he displayed intelligence unmatched by any god. When he let his mischief take hold, his cleverness could twist into dangerous schemes that placed gods and mortals alike in peril. Despite this, Loki was woven into the daily rhythm of divine life, often accompanying Thor on his journeys or sitting beside Odin in council. He was a bridge and a chasm between gods and giants, a reminder that the cosmos was shaped not only by order but also by chaos. Many tales speak of Loki's exploits during this golden age of Asgard. One such story tells of how he nearly destroyed the gods' defenses but ultimately saved them through ingenuity. The walls of Asgard, though strong, were not yet complete, and the gods wished to fortify their realm against the giants who threatened them. A builder arrived, offering to construct a wall so strong and enduring that no giant or monster could ever break through. In return, he asked for a reward few gods would willingly grant: the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freyr. The gods hesitated, but Loki urged them to accept the bargain, confident that the builder would fail to complete the wall by the appointed deadline. Loki believed himself clever, certain the gods would lose nothing. But the builder, aided by a powerful stallion named Svadilfari, began working at an astonishing pace. Day and night they hauled stone after stone, raising the wall higher and stronger than the gods had imagined possible. As the deadline approached, it became clear that Loki's confidence had been misplaced. The builder would succeed, and the gods, furious at being deceived by Loki's advice, demanded that he fix his mistake. Fearful of punishment, Loki transformed himself into a mare and lured Svadilfari away from the work. Without the stallion's strength, the builder failed to meet the deadline, and the gods learned he was no ordinary craftsman but a giant in disguise. Thor struck him down, ending the threat. But Loki's interference had unexpected consequences. Some months later, he returned to Asgard in the form of a mare, having given birth to an extraordinary foal. This creature was Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse destined to become Odin's trusted steed, swift enough to travel between realms with ease. Thus, out of Loki's deception came a gift that served the All-Father for all time. Loki's actions, unpredictable and chaotic, often brought both trouble and benefit, shaping the fate of the gods in ways no one could foresee. Though Loki was a force of disruption, Thor was his opposite in many ways. Thor, the son of Odin and the earth goddess Jr., was the embodiment of strength, courage, and protection. With his hammer Mjolnir in hand, he was the defender of gods and humans alike, standing as a barrier between the peaceful realms and the relentless giants who sought to challenge them. His booming laughter filled the halls of Asgard, and his temper, though fierce, was tempered by a deep sense of duty. Thor's adventures were countless, many shared with Loki, who followed him with amusement and occasional mischief. These stories revealed the bond between Thor and Loki, a relationship of opposing forces that created a strange equilibrium. Thor's strength required balance, and Loki's cunning demanded restraint. Together, they traveled across Midgard and Jotunheim, facing dangers that tested their abilities and deepened the myths that mortals would later tell for generations. In one such tale, the two journeyed to the hall of the giant Utgard Loki. They traveled with Thor's servants, and upon reaching the giant's fortress, they were challenged to prove their abilities. Each test seemed simple at first glance. Loki entered an eating contest against a being named Logi, only to discover that Logi was the embodiment of fire itself. Thor attempted to drain a horn of mead, unaware that its other end connected to the sea. He wrestled an old woman who revealed herself to be old age, a foe no god or giant could ever defeat. Every trial was an illusion designed to humble them, and though they failed each test, Thor's displays of strength frightened Utgard Loki so deeply that he begged them never to return. Such stories reminded the gods that even strength had limits and that the giants possessed powers that could challenge the gods in ways they had never expected. Though the Aesir stood as guardians of order, the giants embodied forces that could not be dismissed. Creation required both, and the balance between them was delicate. As Thor and Loki continued their adventures, Odin watched from the heights of Asgard, contemplating the nature of the worlds he governed. His thirst for knowledge drove him beyond the boundaries of safety and comfort. He wandered through realms in disguise, speaking with seers, warriors, and the dead themselves, always seeking answers to the mysteries that lingered in his mind. The knowledge he gained was often shrouded in grim warnings. Prophecies of a great wolf, a monstrous serpent, and a final battle grew heavier with each vision he uncovered. These dark portents began to take form when Loki fathered several children with the giantess Angrboda. Their offspring were no ordinary beings. The first was Fenrir, a wolf of terrifying size and strength, destined to grow beyond the gods' control. The second was Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, a creature so vast that it encircled the world and bit its own tail. The third was Hel, a girl half living and half corpse, whose face reflected both life and death. When Odin heard of these children, fear gripped his heart, for he knew they were tied to the prophecies that foretold the doom of the gods. He acted swiftly, though his decisions were filled with sorrow. Jormungandr was cast into the ocean that surrounded Midgard, where he grew until his coils wrapped around the entire world. Hel was sent to the underworld, where she became ruler over the dead who died of illness or old age. Fenrir, however, was kept in Asgard, for Odin hoped the gods might tame him. At first, Fenrir was docile enough, and the gods attempted to raise him with care, though none dared approach him except Tyr, the brave and honorable god of war. Tyr fed the wolf and gained his trust, becoming the only one Fenrir regarded with affection. Yet as Fenrir grew, so did the gods' fear. His jaws expanded like a chasm, his strength became unmatched, and his eyes burned with a power that unsettled even the bravest of the Aesir. The gods knew they could not allow Fenrir to roam free, for the prophecies spoke of him as a destroyer, a being destined to kill Odin himself in the final battle. They resolved to bind him, though doing so required cunning. They forged two great chains, each stronger than the last, but Fenrir broke free from both with ease, shaking them apart as if they were nothing more than cobwebs. Realizing that no ordinary chain would restrain him, the gods sought the help of the dwarves, who crafted a magical ribbon known as Gleipnir. It was thin, smooth, and deceptively delicate, made from impossible ingredients such as the sound of a cat's footsteps and the roots of a mountain. When the gods presented it to Fenrir, he grew suspicious. He sensed their fear and would not allow them to bind him unless one of them placed their hand in his mouth as a pledge of good faith. Tyr stepped forward without hesitation. He knew what would happen but accepted the cost. When Fenrir discovered he had been tricked and could not break free, he bit down, tearing Tyr's hand from his arm. The wolf howled with rage as he realized his imprisonment was permanent, and his cries echoed across the realms. Tyr stood silent, bearing his loss with dignity, for he had sacrificed himself for the safety of the cosmos. Fenrir was chained, but the gods knew it was only temporary. The prophecies said he would break free in the final days, and Odin felt the weight of that knowledge pressing deeply upon him. The balance between order and chaos was shifting, and Loki's offspring were at the center of forces stirring toward doom. Even with these shadows gathering, life in Asgard continued. The gods still celebrated their victories, feasted in their golden halls, and guided the mortal world with wisdom and strength. Heroes rose and fell in Midgard, their deeds celebrated in sagas and songs. These mortals looked to the gods for protection and insight, offering sacrifices in sacred groves and temples built to honor their divine patrons. One such hero was Sigurd, a mortal whose fate intertwined with gods and dwarves alike. Though Sigurd's story belonged to a later age, Odin watched him with deep interest. The All-Father cared for the destinies of great warriors, for they would one day join him in Valhalla, preparing for the battle that would come at the world's end. Odin often intervened subtly in the lives of mortals, guiding them toward glory or tragedy, knowing that each heroic soul added strength to the ranks of his warriors. Valhalla itself was a magnificent hall with walls of shields and rafters of spears, where the bravest of the fallen feasted each night and fought each day. These warriors, called the Einherjar, trained endlessly for the final battle of Ragnarok, when they would stand beside the gods against the forces of chaos. Odin valued these heroes deeply, and the Valkyries, his shield maidens, rode across the skies to choose those who would join the ranks of the honored dead. As Odin prepared for the distant storm that loomed on the horizon, Thor continued his battles against giants, wielding Mjolnir with unmatched might. His confrontations with Jormungandr became the stuff of legend, for each encounter shook the seas and stirred storms across the world. Thor knew the serpent would one day rise against him, but until then, he stood vigilant, protecting Midgard from threats that sought to engulf it. Meanwhile, Freyr watched over prosperity and fertility, bringing peace to the lands and ensuring bountiful harvests. His sister Freya guided love and beauty, as well as the mysteries of magic known as Sidr. She was both tender and fierce, leading Valkyries into battle and receiving half of the slain in her own hall, Folkvangr. Her influence touched gods and mortals alike, and her presence added depth and compassion to the divine tapestry. Despite the harmony that often filled Asgard, Loki's restlessness deepened. His mischief became darker, more destructive. He grew resentful, feeling overshadowed by the gods who enjoyed the glory he often helped secure. The seeds of betrayal grew silently in his heart, driven by wounds both real and imagined. Loki's path would one day lead him to choices that would shatter the balance of the cosmos, though the gods did not yet see the full scope of the storm brewing within him. The Norns continued their weaving beneath Yggdrasil, their fingers moving with calm precision as they shaped the fates of all beings. They were neither cruel nor kind. They simply wove what must be, for destiny was a force beyond even the gods' control. Odin often stood near the well of Urd, watching the threads, seeking glimpses of what was to come. The visions he received were fragmented and elusive, but enough to fill him with a profound sense of urgency. He knew that the age of the gods would not last forever. The world would change, the balance would shift, and a reckoning would one day arrive. But Odin also knew that the world was not meant to remain static. The Norse believed deeply in cycles, in endings that led to beginnings, in destruction that forged new creation. The cosmos itself echoed this truth. From Ginnungagap came life. From Ymir's death came worlds. From sacrifice came wisdom. As the gods of Asgard moved through their days, celebrating victories, wrestling with doubts, and facing challenges that tested their strength and resolve, the threads of fate continued to tighten. The joys of the present blended with the shadows of the future, and all beings, whether god or giant, mortal or immortal, played their part in a story far greater than themselves. Time in the realms flowed in a rhythm uniquely its own. Seasons shifted, mortals lived and died, and heroes earned their place among the honored dead. Yet in Asgard, time stretched differently, its passage marked not by years but by sagas. Every challenge, every triumph, every moment of conflict between gods and giants became a thread woven into the vast tapestry of fate. And beneath all the celebrations and battles, beneath the beauty and majesty of the divine halls, there lingered a subtle tension, a quiet reminder that the peace the gods enjoyed was fragile. The source of that fragility lay largely in the unpredictability of Loki. Though he still lived among the gods, his heart had begun to drift further from them. He felt a growing divide between himself and the Aesir, a divide shaped by resentment, jealousy, and the sense that he had given much yet received little in return. Loki's cleverness often saved the gods, but few praised him. His mistakes, however, brought fury upon his name, and each scolding, each glare, deepened the bitterness brewing within him. But Loki remained a complex being, not entirely swayed by malice. His actions were often driven by impulse rather than intent. This duality made him both fascinating and dangerous, for he could shift from helpful to harmful in the span of a heartbeat. One such moment came when he interfered with the goddess Sif, Thor's wife. Sif was known for her beautiful golden hair, a symbol of wheat, fertility, and the luscious fields of Midgard. One day, Loki, driven by mischief and perhaps a desire to amuse himself, cut off her shining locks while she slept. When Thor discovered this, his rage filled the halls of Asgard. His voice boomed like thunder, his eyes burned with fury, and he seized Loki, threatening to break every bone in his body unless he restored Sif's hair to its former glory. Loki, fearing the wrath of the thunder god, immediately sought a solution. He traveled to Svartalfheim, where the dwarves forged wonders beyond imagination. There he pleaded with the sons of Ivaldi to craft hair of pure gold that would grow like real strands. The dwarves agreed and presented Loki with a gift that shimmered brighter than the sun. But Loki, incapable of keeping himself away from trouble, challenged another group of dwarves to create even greater treasures. He promised his own head if they could forge wonders superior to those made for Sif. The dwarves accepted, crafting 3 additional gifts of immense power: Gungnir, Odin's flawless spear; Skidbladnir, Freyr's ship that could fold into a small pouch; and Mjolnir, the hammer that would become Thor's greatest weapon. The handle of Mjolnir was slightly short due to Loki's interference during the forging, but its power remained unmatched. When the gods judged the gifts, they declared Mjolnir the greatest of all, for with it Thor could protect Asgard from any threat. Loki, having promised his head and realizing he could not escape the bargain, tried to flee. But the dwarves caught him. Clever as ever, Loki argued that they were entitled to his head but not his neck, for he had not wagered that part. Unable to find a way around this, the dwarves settled for sewing Loki's mouth shut as punishment for his lies. The stitches eventually came undone, but the memory of this humiliation fueled the resentment growing within his heart. Despite Loki's worsening relationship with the gods, he remained intertwined in their lives. His shape-shifting abilities made him invaluable, his wit brought solutions to problems the gods faced, and his unpredictable nature forged both chaos and opportunity. Even Odin, who understood Loki more deeply than the others, kept him close, perhaps believing that steering chaos was better than banishing it. Yet Odin also knew that fate had larger plans for Loki and that these plans were tied to the doom that the gods feared. The prophecies spoke of Loki's children as harbingers of destruction, and already 2 of them had grown into forces of nature. Jormungandr lay coiled around Midgard, its body touching ocean and sky. Fenrir was bound by Gleipnir, but his strength continued to grow. And in the cold depths of Helheim, Hel ruled over the dead with an authority that even the gods respected. The gods could sense that the balance of the realms was shifting. Even small disturbances felt like tremors beneath the surface, hints of something far greater awakening. Thor noticed storms growing more violent. Freyr sensed periods of unusual stillness before harvests. Heimdall, the ever-watchful guardian of the Bifrost, heard faint echoes across the worlds that seemed out of place. Odin gathered these clues silently, storing them in the depths of his mind as pieces of a puzzle only he was trying to solve. Still, there were times when Asgard shone in splendor, its halls filled with laughter, feasts, and music. The gods celebrated their victories, honored the fallen heroes, and enjoyed the company of one another. In those moments, the shadow of fate felt distant, like a storm beyond the horizon. One such era unfolded when Baldr, the shining god, rose to prominence. Baldr, son of Odin and Frigg, was beloved by all. His beauty radiated like sunlight, his kindness touched gods and mortals alike, and his presence brought joy wherever he walked. Baldr's dreams, however, became troubled. Night after night, visions of his own death haunted him. Disturbed, he shared these nightmares with the gods, and fear rippled through Asgard, for Baldr's death was foretold as the first sign that Ragnarok had begun. Frigg, Baldr's mother, moved swiftly to protect her son. She traveled across the realms, asking every being, creature, plant, and object to swear an oath never to harm Baldr. Fire swore it would not burn him. Water promised it would not drown him. Stone vowed not to crush him. Metals, beasts, diseases, and even weapons agreed. All things, great and small, pledged their loyalty to Baldr. When Frigg returned to Asgard, she believed he was safe. To test this belief, the gods made a game of throwing objects at Baldr. Spears shattered harmlessly against his skin. Stones bounced away. Knives refused to pierce him. The gods laughed, delighted by Baldr's invulnerability, and the halls of Asgard echoed with their merriment. But Loki watched this revelry with growing curiosity. Disguised as an old woman, he approached Frigg and asked whether every single thing had truly sworn to protect Baldr. Frigg revealed that only one thing had been overlooked, a small, insignificant plant called mistletoe. She deemed it too young and fragile to pose any threat. This was all Loki needed. He shaped mistletoe into a spear or arrow, depending on the tale, and approached Hödr, Baldr's blind brother. Loki placed the weapon in Hödr's hands and guided him to join the game the gods were playing. Hödr, unaware of the trick, threw the mistletoe. The weapon pierced Baldr's heart, and the shining god fell lifeless to the ground. Silence engulfed Asgard. Their joy turned to horror as they realized the magnitude of what had happened. Baldr's death was not merely a tragedy but a prophecy fulfilled, a signal that the end of days had begun its slow but unstoppable march. Frigg wept in anguish, Odin's heart grew heavy with grief, and the gods' unity fractured under the weight of loss. Determined to bring Baldr back, the gods sent Hermod, another son of Odin, to Hel's realm. Hermod rode Sleipnir through darkness and danger until he reached Hel's hall. He pleaded for Baldr's release, and Hel agreed on one condition. Every being in the 9 worlds had to weep for Baldr, proving that he was truly loved by all creation. The gods sent messengers across the realms. Everything and everyone wept. Stones cried tears of dew. Metals echoed with sorrow. The earth itself mourned. But one being refused to shed a tear. A giantess named Thok sat in a cave and declared coldly that she would not mourn Baldr. Many believed Thok was Loki in disguise. Because of her refusal, Baldr remained in Hel's realm, his fate sealed until the end of the world. The gods' grief turned to rage. They hunted Loki, determined to punish him for his role in Baldr's death. Loki fled, shape-shifting into various forms, hiding in mountains and rivers. But the gods eventually found him. They dragged him to a cave where they bound him with the entrails of his own son. A serpent was placed above him, dripping venom onto his face. Loki's wife, Sigyn, stayed beside him, catching the venom in a bowl. But whenever she had to empty it, drops fell onto Loki's skin, making him writhe in agony. His twisting caused earthquakes in Midgard, tremors of suffering that reflected the torment of his bound body. Loki's imprisonment marked a turning point. The mischief maker, once tolerated despite his flaws, had become a symbol of betrayal and destruction. The gods felt the approaching doom more keenly now. The death of Baldr shook the foundations of Asgard, and even the walls that once stood unbreakable seemed vulnerable under the weight of sorrow. Yet life continued. The gods maintained their duties, watching over the realms and guiding mortals. Midgard flourished in cycles of birth, death, war, and harvest. Heroes rose to prominence, shaping history with their courage. The dwarves continued their crafting, the elves tended to the beauty of the natural world, and the giants plotted in their distant strongholds. The 9 worlds lived in a fragile harmony, united by the tree Yggdrasil, whose branches held the sky and whose roots drank from the wells of wisdom, chaos, and fate. But beneath the peace, Yggdrasil trembled at times. Nidhogg, the serpent gnawing at its roots, grew restless. The howling of wolves echoed in distant hills. Strange weather patterns swept the realms, and seers in Midgard spoke of omens they did not fully understand. The Norns continued their weaving, their expressions calm, their movement steady, as if nothing had changed. But Odin knew the meaning of these signs. He wandered more frequently, seeking answers in whispers carried by the wind, in the songs of ravens, in the riddles of giants. His 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin, flew across the worlds each day, bringing back tidings that weighed heavily on his mind. Odin's gaze grew more distant, his thoughts more troubled. He had prepared for Ragnarok his entire life, but preparation did not ease the sorrow that came from knowing it would one day arrive. Still, the gods tried to fortify their realm. They strengthened alliances, trained hard in combat, and stood vigilant at the Bifrost. Heimdall sharpened his senses further, knowing he would one day blow the Gjallarhorn to awaken the gods when the final battle began. Tyr, despite losing his hand, remained resolute and fearless, a symbol of unwavering courage. Freyr, though peaceful by nature, sensed his own fate approaching, for he had given away his magical sword long ago, a decision that would haunt him in the days to come. But even as signs accumulated, the final events had not yet begun. The realms still breathed. The sun still rose over Midgard, casting its glow on mountains, seas, and fields. Children were born, songs were sung, and stories spread across villages and longhouses. The world lived between 2 moments, suspended between the bright memories of the past and the dark future yet to unfold. The gods gathered often in council, their discussions filled with concern and uncertainty. Though they possessed great power, they were not all-knowing. The future remained a tapestry glimpsed only in fragments, woven by hands indifferent to desires or fears. But in their hearts, each god carried a hope that the final battle could be delayed, or perhaps even avoided. Such hopes, though faint, illuminated the halls of Asgard like flickering candles against an encroaching night. Yet fate is relentless. And the events set into motion long ago, with Ymir's death, Loki's birth, and the weaving of destiny, were beginning to converge. The balance was tilting. The worlds were changing. And though the gods held fast to their duties, the end had already begun to stir. In the years that followed Baldr's death, the realms of the cosmos seemed to move under a veil of quiet dread. The 9 worlds still thrived in their own rhythms, but beneath their surface lay a tremor, a subtle shift that the gods could feel in their bones. It was as though the harmony that had once held creation together was beginning to fray. Even the wind seemed to whisper of changes that could not be undone. Odin sensed these omens more strongly than any other. His journeys became longer, his nights more sleepless. He spent hours standing upon the highest point of Asgard, gazing out across the worlds, searching for signs that might confirm or deny the prophecies he feared. The ravens perched on his shoulders, their dark wings rustling in the cold air as they brought him news of distant lands. Hugin carried thoughts, swift as the movement of clouds. Munin carried memory, holding echoes of the past to illuminate the future. Odin's concern grew with each report they delivered. He visited the Norns more frequently now, descending to the roots of Yggdrasil where they wove the fates of all beings. Though they were silent in their work, their stillness spoke volumes to him. They offered no comfort, for fate could not be altered, and Odin knew that even he was powerless before its design. Still, he asked questions, hoping to find some hidden path, some narrow thread of possibility that might avert disaster. But the Norns gave no answers. Their eyes reflected eternity, and in their silence, Odin felt the certainty of what lay ahead. In Midgard, the mortal realm, storms grew harsher. Winters lasted longer. Crops failed unexpectedly, and wars broke out between distant kingdoms. The skies darkened with unusual clouds, and strange lights flickered across the horizon. Mortals interpreted these as signs of the gods' displeasure, offering more sacrifices and prayers in hopes of restoring balance. Yet these disturbances were not punishments but symptoms of the world shifting toward its final cycle. Even the animals behaved differently. Wolves prowled in greater numbers, their howls echoing across frozen lakes and dense forests. Seers in Midgard spoke of 2 particular wolves, Skoll and Hati, who chased the sun and moon across the sky. These wolves, driven by hunger and destiny, grew closer each year to their cosmic prey. Their pursuit was no longer a distant threat but a looming reality. The day they succeeded would mark the beginning of events the gods feared most. In Jotunheim, the land of giants, murmurs spread through icy cliffs and shadowed forests. The giants sensed the weakening barrier between their world and Asgard. Ancient grudges rekindled. Weapons were forged, warriors were gathered, and the giants prepared for the war they had awaited for countless ages. The death of Baldr had emboldened them, for they knew it meant the gods had lost a symbol of purity and hope. Even Yggdrasil, the great world tree, trembled more frequently. Its leaves rustled with unease, and the creatures that dwelled upon it grew restless. The eagle at its top peered across the skies with growing agitation. Ratatoskr, the ever-running messenger, carried more biting words between the eagle and Nidhogg, whose teeth sank deeper into the roots each day. The balance that Yggdrasil maintained was slowly eroding. Within Asgard, the gods tried to hold on to their routines, but their hearts carried the weight of dread. Thor tightened his grip on Mjolnir, sensing storms gathering on the edge of the world. Freyr stood upon high cliffs, looking toward distant lands with a sorrow he rarely showed. He had once traded away his magical sword in exchange for love, and though his decision had brought him joy, he knew the price he would one day pay. Without his sword, he would face a foe that no mortal or god could withstand. Heimdall sharpened his senses further, listening for even the faintest sign of trouble. His vigilance never wavered, for he knew he was destined to stand at the beginning and the end, to see the spark of conflict ignite and to witness its final extinguishing. Despite the shadows creeping across the realms, the gods continued to meet in their great halls. They discussed what measures could be taken and what preparations were needed. They argued, debated, and tried to forge a plan capable of resisting the inevitable. Yet they could not act blindly, for each decision carried consequences that might hasten their downfall or delay it only briefly. Odin understood better than any that the cycle of creation and destruction was ancient and unbreakable. Just as the world had been born from Ymir's sacrifice, so too would it one day fall to allow a new age to emerge. But knowing this did not ease the burden he carried. He loved the world he had shaped, the gods he led, and the mortals who looked to him with wonder and devotion. The thought of losing them filled him with a sorrow so deep that even the ravens could not soothe it. But Odin also knew that fear could not guide him. Action was necessary, even if the outcome remained unchanged. And so he continued to gather knowledge, seeking fragments of wisdom that might provide some advantage in the final confrontation. He journeyed to the farthest realms, speaking with spirits, giants, and ancient beings who remembered the earliest ages of existence. He learned of weapons hidden deep within the earth, of monsters stirring beneath oceans, of forgotten magics whose power might still be wielded. Meanwhile, Loki remained bound in the cavern where the gods had imprisoned him. Venom dripped relentlessly from the serpent above, burning his skin and filling him with agony. His screams shook the mountains and seas, causing earthquakes across Midgard. Sigyn stayed by his side, catching the venom when she could, her devotion unbroken despite the torment that surrounded them. But Loki's suffering fueled his rage. Every drop of venom deepened the darkness within him. Every tremor of pain hardened his heart. He blamed the gods for his fate, for the death of his sons, for the chains that bound him. And in time, his wrath would become the spark that ignited the final battle. The realms did not descend into chaos all at once. The end approached in stages, marked by events that shook the fabric of creation. The first of these was the Fimbulwinter. It began subtly, with colder winds and heavier snowfalls. Then the winter deepened. Storms raged without pause. Frost spread across Midgard, covering forests, rivers, and mountains in a blanket of ice. The sun grew dim, its warmth fading until it could no longer melt the snow. 3 winters passed without a single summer. Crops failed, animals perished, and famine spread across the land. Mortals struggled to survive. Villages collapsed under the weight of snow. Families split apart, turning on one another in desperation. Wars broke out as kingdoms fought for dwindling resources. Fimbulwinter was not merely a season. It was the unraveling of the natural world, a sign that the delicate balance of creation had reached its breaking point. The gods watched in sorrow, knowing they could not intervene. Fimbulwinter was a necessary step in the cycle foretold by prophecy. It was the precursor to Ragnarok, a threshold that once crossed could never be undone. As the cold tightened its grip, Odin knew that time was running out. He continued to seek knowledge, traveling through realms and seeking answers. He visited the giant Vafthrûdnir, a being of immense wisdom. Disguised as a wanderer, Odin challenged him to a contest of riddles, each question probing deeper into the nature of the cosmos. The two exchanged knowledge of creation, of the gods' lineage, of the origins of giants and dwarves. But Odin's final question struck at the heart of fate itself. He asked what Odin whispered to Baldr before the shining god was placed on his funeral pyre. Vafthrûdnir recognized the question as one only Odin could ask, and he knew he had been defeated. Odin's victory in this contest brought him new insights, but it also confirmed what he had feared. The end was indeed approaching. During this time, another prophecy began to unfold. In Midgard, 2 wolves grew bolder in their chase. Skoll pursued the sun, while Hati chased the moon. Each day, the distance closed, until one fateful moment when Skoll leapt forward and swallowed the sun. Darkness spread instantly across the sky, a shadow that swallowed the final remnants of warmth. Hati soon caught the moon, plunging the world into a night without stars. The gods knew then that the final act had begun. Yggdrasil trembled violently, its branches shaking, its roots groaning. Mountains crumbled, oceans boiled, and the 9 realms echoed with chaos. In Jotunheim, the giants prepared for war, gathering forces that had waited generations for this moment. In the depths of Niflheim, Hel began her march, leading an army of the dead. The ship Naglfar, made from the fingernails of the deceased, broke free from its moorings and sailed toward the battlefield. And in the cavern where Loki suffered, the chains that held him snapped. The serpent's venom no longer fell upon him. Loki rose with a fury so deep that even the gods could feel the tremor of his awakening. Fenrir broke free from Gleipnir, his massive jaws opening wide enough to devour the sky. Jormungandr stirred within the depths of the ocean, rising to the surface and releasing a poisonous breath that filled the air. Fire giants from Muspelheim marched under their king, Surt, whose flaming sword burned brighter than any star. As these forces gathered, Heimdall saw them from the Bifrost and knew the moment had come. He raised the Gjallar horn to his lips and blew with all his strength. The sound echoed across the worlds, shaking mountains, stirring the dead, and calling the gods to arms. It was the horn of awakening, the signal that Ragnarok had arrived. Odin mounted Sleipnir and rode to gather his warriors. Thor lifted Mjolnir, feeling the weight of destiny settle upon him. Freyr stood ready despite the absence of his sword. Tyr prepared to face a foe he had once fed with his own hand. Heimdall took his position at the bridge, knowing he would soon confront the being who had brought so much discord to the realms. The gods filed out of Asgard for the final time, their faces set with determination and sorrow. They knew they would not survive this battle. They knew the world they had built would fall. But they also knew that standing against chaos, even when defeat was inevitable, was their purpose. The Aesir did not go to Ragnarok to win. They went to fulfill their destiny. Thunder rolled across the sky as the gods marched toward Vigrid, the battlefield where the final confrontation would unfold. The giants approached from the east. Loki led the forces of Hel from the north. Surt and the fire giants surged from the south, flames spreading in their wake. Jormungandr rose from the sea, its coils thrashing, its venom poisoning the air. Fenrir's massive form strode across the land, each step splitting the earth beneath him. The end of the world had begun. The plain of Vigrid stretched endlessly, a vast and barren expanse that seemed crafted solely for the final confrontation. As Odin and the gods approached, the ground beneath them trembled from the advancing armies of their enemies. The sky above was filled with swirling darkness, lit only by distant flames rising from Muspelheim. The air itself tasted of ash and venom, a mixture of fire and poison that foretold the magnitude of destruction about to unfold. Odin rode at the front, his cloak whipping behind him like a shadow torn from the heavens. Sleipnir's 8 hooves struck the ground with unparalleled speed, carrying the All-Father to the position destiny had long reserved for him. The Einherjar marched behind, a sea of warriors chosen from the bravest who had lived and died in Midgard. These were the heroes of countless battles, the souls Odin had prepared for this very moment. Their armor gleamed despite the darkness, and their spirits burned with the knowledge that they fought not for victory but for the preservation of all that had ever existed. Across the field, the giants assembled, their hulking forms rising like mountains against the faint horizon. Their roars and war cries spread across the battlefield, drowning out even the thunder that rumbled through the air. They were forces of chaos, ancient beings who had waited through eons to reclaim the dominion they believed rightfully theirs. Among them stood Jotunheim's greatest champions, frost giants whose breath froze the winds and fire giants whose flames crackled with the promise of annihilation. Surt, the fire giant king, led his armies with a blade of flame so bright it tore through the darkness like a burning star. He towered above his warriors, a walking inferno whose presence radiated destruction. The heat from his sword spread across the field, scorching the grass and melting the stones beneath him. His destiny was clear: he would bring fire to the world and burn it until nothing remained. From the northern edge of Vigrid came the forces of Hel, silent and grim. The dead marched with empty eyes, their movement steady and relentless. They bore the marks of illness, age, and unremarkable deaths, for they were those who had not died in battle and therefore had not earned a place in Valhalla or Folkvang. Their queen rode at the front, half her face living, half dead, her expression unreadable. Hel did not rage or roar. She simply moved forward with a calm certainty, for she knew that destiny had brought her here just as it had the gods. Heimdall stood at the center of the Bifrost before joining the gods upon the field. His senses, sharper than any being in existence, absorbed the magnitude of what lay ahead. He had blown the Gjallarhorn with full knowledge that it would lead him to his own death, yet he felt no fear, only resolve. His duty, like the duties of all gods, was never to escape destiny but to fulfill it with honor. Thor marched beside him, gripping Mjolnir with fierce determination. His eyes burned with the fire of battle, yet beneath his strength lay sorrow for what was to come. He knew that he and Jormungandr would meet for the last time on this field, and he accepted it. The serpent had long been his greatest foe, and it was fitting that their final encounter would shape the fate of the world. Freyr stepped forward as well, though he bore no weapon capable of matching the power he would face. He had once possessed a sword forged by dwarves that could fight on its own, but he had traded it for the love of the giantess Gerd. Though he cherished the love their union brought, he knew that this sacrifice would cost him his life. As he approached the battlefield, he carried only a simple antler, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what destiny demanded. Tyr, one-handed yet unbroken, prepared to face Garm, the monstrous hound of Hel. Their confrontation had been foretold, and both understood that neither would survive. Tyr's spirit blazed with the courage that had always defined him, the same courage that had once led him to place his hand in Fenrir's jaws. He knew the cost of sacrifice better than most, and he strode toward the battlefield with unwavering resolve. As the armies positioned themselves, a great silence fell across Vigrid. The world seemed to hold its breath. The sun and moon no longer shone in the sky, swallowed by Skoll and Hati. The stars had vanished. Darkness stretched boundlessly overhead, broken only by the faint glow of Surt's blazing sword. Even Yggdrasil groaned, its branches trembling, its roots cracking as the final act of the cosmic cycle prepared to unfold. Then, without warning, the ground shook violently. Fenrir leapt forward, his massive body covering enormous distances with each stride. Odin spurred Sleipnir into motion, charging directly toward the wolf. The All-Father raised his spear Gungnir, its tip gleaming with ancient power. The Einherjar rushed behind him, shouting war cries that split the air. Odin met Fenrir in a clash that echoed across the 9 realms. Gungnir struck, but the wolf's hide was thicker than stone, stronger than steel. Fenrir lunged and swallowed Odin whole, closing his immense jaws around the god who had led Asgard since its creation. The shockwave of the blow sent ripples across the battlefield. The Einherjar fought fiercely, but their grief made their hearts burn with fury. Vidar, Odin's silent son, stepped forward in that moment. He had long been destined to avenge his father. Vidar wore a thick shoe made from all the scraps of leather mortals had discarded throughout time, a shoe crafted to withstand the heavens themselves. He rushed at Fenrir, prying open the wolf's jaws with unimaginable strength. Then he drove his foot onto the wolf's lower jaw and forced a blade into the upper. Fenrir writhed, roared, and finally fell lifeless upon the plain. Odin was avenged, though the cost was immeasurable. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Thor faced Jormungandr. The thunder god roared, calling forth lightning that streaked across the darkened sky. The serpent responded with a great hiss, its venom misting the air, poisoning the earth and churning the sea into violent waves. Thor charged forward, swinging Mjolnir with unparalleled force. Each strike created thunderclaps that shook the foundations of the world. Jormungandr lunged, wrapping its enormous coils around Thor, squeezing with crushing strength. Thor broke free, hammering blow after blow upon the serpent's scales. Finally, with a strike that lit the sky brighter than any star, Thor shattered Jormungandr's skull. The serpent collapsed, its body unwinding across the field like a dying storm. But the victory cost Thor dearly. Jormungandr's venom seeped into the air, and with each step Thor took, the poison sank deeper into his lungs. He staggered 9 steps before collapsing, succumbing to the serpent's deadly breath. Thor's fall echoed through the realms, the sound of thunder fading into silence. Freyr met Surt in battle, wielding only his antler. Surt's flaming sword illuminated the battlefield so brightly that shadows vanished beneath its glow. Freyr fought valiantly, his strength unmatched even without his former weapon. But the sword Surt carried burned with the fires of Muspelheim, a power that no ordinary weapon could withstand. Sparks flew as the two clashed, and the heat radiating from Surt scorched the land around them. Freyr fought bravely but fell under the might of the fire giant's blade. Tyr and the monstrous hound Garm clashed in a fierce struggle that shook the gates of hell. Their battle was raw and brutal, each blow resonating with the force of destiny. Tyr's one hand gripped his weapon, his spirit burning with courage. Garm fought with wild fury, his claws tearing through the earth. In the end, Tyr succeeded in slaying the beast, but not before Garm delivered a fatal wound. The god of war fell beside the hound he had defeated, their destinies fulfilled. Heimdall confronted Loki on the battlefield. The guardian of the Bifrost and the trickster stood face to face, old rivals bound by fate. Loki's eyes burned with hatred, while Heimdall's gaze was steady, resolute. Their battle was swift and intense, each matching the other blow for blow. Heimdall struck with precision, Loki with cunning. But in the end, both fell, their lives extinguished in a final, fatal exchange. As the gods and giants clashed, the world began to tear apart. Mountains crumbled, oceans surged, and the sky cracked with fire. The roots of Yggdrasil splintered under the immense weight of destruction. The Midgard serpent's venom mixed with Surt's fire, creating storms of poison and flame that spread across the realms. Then Surt raised his flaming sword high, its fire glowing brighter than all the stars that had once filled the heavens. With a single, mighty sweep, he brought the blade down and unleashed a wave of fire that consumed everything. Forests burned, seas evaporated, and mountains melted. The fire spread across the 9 worlds, devouring gods, giants, mortals, and all living things. Even Asgard, the shining realm of the gods, fell to the flames. The world was engulfed in fire, reduced to ash and smoke. The sky collapsed. The earth sank into the sea. All that had existed was destroyed. Yet the Norse understood that destruction was not an end but a transformation. Just as the world had been born from the remains of Ymir, so too would it rise anew from the remnants of Ragnarok. The cycle of creation and destruction was unending, eternal, woven into the very fabric of existence. As the firestorm consumed the realms and darkness swallowed the sky, a strange stillness settled over the cosmos. And in that stillness, the seeds of a new beginning waited to emerge. When the fires of Surt finally cooled and the smoke of Ragnarok drifted away like a fading dream, a deep silence settled over everything that remained. The 9 worlds, once full of life, had been swallowed by flame, shattered by battle, and drowned beneath rising seas. The great tree Yggdrasil, whose branches had touched the heavens and whose roots had reached into the darkest realms, had trembled beneath the destruction, yet in some mysterious way it endured. Though wounded, though scarred by the chaos that had torn through creation, Yggdrasil still lived. And from that frail but persistent life came the possibility of renewal. The raging fires receded, leaving behind a world cleansed of old burdens. The oceans grew calm again. Mountains that had melted began to rise anew from beneath the waves. The sky slowly cleared, revealing faint light that strengthened as the poison clouds lifted. A fresh wind swept across the ruins, carrying with it the scent of beginnings. It was not the world that had existed before. It was something new, shaped from the ashes of what had once been. In the quiet after the storm, a green world emerged. Grass sprouted across gentle hills. Trees unfurled new leaves. Rivers found pathways through newly formed valleys. The earth breathed again, as though relieved of the weight of ages. This rebirth mirrored the earliest days of creation when fire and frost first met to give form to life, yet now the world arose not from chaos but from the remnants of a cycle completed. From the trunk of Yggdrasil, protected during the destruction, two humans emerged. They were named Lif and Lifthraser. During Ragnarok, they had hidden within the tree itself, sustained by the dew that dripped from its branches. When the fires died and the darkness lifted, they stepped forth into the reborn world. Their purpose was clear. They would become the ancestors of a new human race, populating the earth with their descendants and continuing the cycle of life that had begun with Ask and Embla. Their survival symbolized renewal, resilience, and hope. Though the gods had fallen and the worlds had burned, humanity endured. The Norse believed that this revealed something essential about existence. Even in the face of catastrophic loss, life found a way to continue. Creation and destruction were partners, and each ending carried within it the seed of a new beginning. But the rebirth of the world was not limited to humans alone. Some gods, too, survived the destruction. Not all had fallen in battle. Not all had perished in fire. Some returned from places beyond death, while others had been destined to endure. Baldr, the shining god whose death had signaled the beginning of the end, emerged from Hell's realm revived. Hodr, his blind brother, returned with him. The two embraced one another, their past enmity washed away in the cleansing cycle of destruction and rebirth. The gods who had once mourned Baldr's death now rejoiced at his return, for his presence symbolized light restored. Vidar and Vili, sons of Odin, survived as well, each stepping into the new world with quiet strength. Vidar, who had avenged his father by slaying Fenrir, now carried the weight of Odin's legacy. Vili, strong and steadfast, represented resilience and continuity. They were joined by Modi and Magni, sons of Thor, who carried their father's hammer Mjolnir. The hammer endured despite the destruction, its power as mighty as ever, now passed to a new generation. These surviving gods gathered on the plains where Asgard had once stood. The halls were gone, reduced to ash, but the memory of the shining realm remained. From these ruins they looked out upon the new world, contemplating their roles within it. They were no longer the rulers who had presided over a cosmos of 9 interconnected realms. Their purpose now was to guide the dawn of a new age, shaped by lessons learned through conflict, sacrifice, and renewal. The gods spoke of what had come before and what must come after. They recalled the deeds of Odin, Thor, Freyr, and Tyr. They remembered the bravery of the Einherjar, the cunning of Loki, and the fearlessness of the giants. They shared stories of battles won and lost, of mistakes and triumphs, weaving the memory of the old world into the foundation of the new. For though the cycle had completed, the past remained a teacher, its lessons etched into the souls of all who survived. Gradually, the world took on more form. Lakes filled with clear water. Animals returned, some newly created, others transformed or reborn from the remnants of their ancestors. Birds soared through the brightening sky. fields grew fertile. The world, though fresh and fragile, held immense promise. It was a place waiting to be shaped by gods and humans alike, a canvas upon which the next ages would be painted. Baldr, whose radiant presence once brought joy to Asgard, became a guiding light in this new world. His return marked not only the rebirth of peace but also the restoration of wisdom and harmony. His gentle nature balanced the strength of Vidar, the resilience of Vili, and the courage of Modi and Magni. Together, they represented a pantheon renewed in spirit, different from the old Aesir yet born of their legacy. The Norse believed that the new world would be free from the shadows that had haunted the old one. No longer would Loki's treachery threaten the foundation of the realms. No longer would giants and gods be bound in constant conflict. The sun itself would be reborn, as Sol's daughter took her mother's place in the sky, bringing warmth and light to the world below. This young sun would shine brighter, untainted by the devouring wolf that had once chased its predecessor. In this renewed cosmos, the gods would build new halls. Baldr and Hodr would dwell together in a place where joy and reconciliation prevailed. Vidar and Vali would stand as guardians of order and justice. Modi and Magni, inheritors of Thor's strength, would wield Mjolnir and ensure that balance continued. Though the world had been reshaped, the divine presence remained, watching over humanity and guiding its progress. The field of Vigrid, once soaked in blood and fire, now became fertile ground. Grass grew where giants had fallen. Flowers bloomed where the bodies of gods had lain. The scars of battle faded beneath new growth. Nature itself seemed eager to heal, embracing the opportunity to begin again without the conflict that had defined the earlier age. In time, humans multiplied. Lif and Lifthraiser's children became the first inhabitants of this new era, spreading across the land, building homes, and shaping societies. They carried no memory of the gods' long battles, but the surviving gods watched over them with the quiet wisdom gained through ages of hardship. The lessons of the past guided the choices of the present. Though the world had been reborn, its connection to the old ways remained deep. Stories of the gods, their sacrifices, and their triumphs lived on. Mortals continued to pass these stories down from generation to generation. Though the cycle had changed, memory remained. And in those stories, ancient truths persisted. They taught of courage in the face of doom, of sacrifice made for the greater good, of love that transcended destruction, and of the enduring resilience of life. As the new gods walked across the renewed world, they often paused to reflect on what had been. They remembered their old companions, the laughter of Thor, the stern wisdom of Odin, the gentle songs of Freyr, and the brave heart of Tyr. They honored those memories not with sorrow but with pride, knowing that the old gods had fulfilled their destinies and laid the foundation upon which the new age could flourish. Some legends say that after the rebirth, the gods found a set of golden tablets in the newly awakened grass. These tablets contained the wisdom of ages, the memories of everything that had come before. They reminded the gods of their origins, the creation of the worlds, the crafting of humanity, and the shaping of fate. They were a testament to the unbroken chain that linked the past to the present, proof that even destruction could not sever the thread of knowledge and tradition. As the new world settled into balance, the great cosmic forces grew calm. The seas resumed their gentle rhythms. The winds flowed softly. The sky shone with a renewed brilliance. Even Yggdrasil, though wounded, spread new growth, its branches stretching toward the heavens, its roots drinking deeply from the waters of fate. The creatures that inhabited the tree resumed their eternal patterns. The eagle perched once more at its top. Nidhogg, though still gnawing, seemed less threatening in a world no longer teetering toward doom. The Norse saw this renewed cosmos as part of an eternal cycle. There would always be beginnings and endings, destruction and creation, shadow and light. Ragnarok was not the final word, but a necessary step in the ongoing story of the universe. Life was not linear but circular, always moving forward yet always echoing what had come before. This understanding reflected the Norse worldview, shaped by the harsh landscapes of the north. They lived with the constant knowledge that winter followed summer, that storms threatened their homes, that life was fragile and unpredictable. Their myths mirrored this reality, acknowledging suffering yet celebrating resilience. They embraced the idea that even in the face of inevitable destruction, one must stand bravely, fight nobly, and accept one's destiny. In the reborn world, these values lived on. Mortals honored the gods who had died defending creation. They spoke of Odin's sacrifices for wisdom, of Thor's courage against the serpent, of Freyr's willingness to give up his sword for love, of Tyr's bravery in placing his hand in the jaws of Fenrir. These stories became guiding lights, teaching that honor, loyalty, love, and perseverance mattered even when outcomes could not be controlled. The gods, too, honored these lessons. They stepped lightly across the new lands, aware of the fragility of creation. They guided humans without overpowering them, watched over nature without dominating it, and existed with a new sense of humility forged through loss. Where once they had stood as mighty rulers, they now stood as wise shepherds, guardians of a world crafted from ashes and renewed by hope. The cycle of the cosmos, though eternal, had entered a new chapter. It was a chapter filled with potential, with beauty, with the opportunity to create a world less burdened by the conflicts of the past. The surviving gods walked into this future with calm determination, ready to shape a new destiny while honoring the sacrifices that had made it possible. And so the story continued, not with the thunder of war but with the gentle murmur of renewal. The world, once destroyed, now breathed again. Life returned. Light returned. Hope returned. The Norse creation story did not end with destruction. It ended with rebirth. As the new world settled into its rhythms, and the surviving gods walked its green fields and shimmering shores, the story of creation and destruction took on a deeper layer of meaning. The cycles that had shaped the cosmos from its earliest days now revealed themselves in full clarity. The Norse understood that nothing in existence remains untouched by change. Everything from the mightiest god to the smallest blade of grass followed a path of becoming, transforming, fading, and returning. This idea lay at the heart of their worldview, rooted not just in religious belief but in the experience of life in lands where nature could be both nurturing and merciless. In their daily lives, the ancient Norse people saw reflections of the myths that formed the foundation of their understanding of the cosmos. The long winters that seemed endless, the short summers that burst with life, the storms that reshaped coastlines, and the unpredictable seas that could both feed and swallow entire communities, all of these mirrored the stories of gods and giants, creation and destruction. The mythological cycle of the universe was, in many ways, a poetic expression of the reality they faced. Because of this, the Norse creation story resonated deeply with them. It was not merely a tale of how the world came to be but a reflection of their own existence. It told of a cosmos born from extremes, shaped by struggle, sustained through sacrifice, and destined to transform again. It offered both warning and comfort. Warning, because even the gods could not escape fate. Comfort, because destruction was never final. There was always a new dawn, a new world rising from the ashes. The gods themselves embodied these lessons. Odin's relentless pursuit of wisdom showed that understanding often requires sacrifice. Thor's courage demonstrated that strength must be tempered by responsibility. Freyr's love revealed that the choices made from the heart carry consequences both beautiful and tragic. Loki reminded people that chaos is ever-present, unpredictable, and capable of reshaping the world in ways both shocking and inevitable. And Baldr, whose return marked the beginning of a new age, embodied hope, the belief that light can return even after the darkest night. As generations passed, the Norse wove these stories into their cultural identity. The creation myth influenced their art, with carvings of Yggdrasil found on stones, jewelry, and ships. Warriors carried symbols of Thor's hammer not just as religious tokens but as reminders of protection and bravery. Farmers offered prayers to Freyr for fertile fields, fishermen invoked Njord for safe passage, and women called upon Frigg for guidance in family matters. The myths shaped rituals, celebrations, and the understanding of life's mysteries. But the importance of the Norse creation cycle did not remain confined to ancient times. Its themes continued to resonate long after Viking societies faded, echoing through centuries of storytelling, scholarship, and art. The myth's influence spread beyond Scandinavia, carried through manuscripts, oral traditions, and the imaginations of those who encountered its powerful ideas. In modern culture, the Norse creation myth remains one of the most widely recognized mythological cycles. Its characters and events appear in literature, paintings, operas, films, video games, and countless other creative works. These stories have inspired writers, artists, filmmakers, and storytellers around the world, each interpreting the myths through new lenses while retaining their timeless essence. For example, the figure of Odin has become a symbol of wisdom, authority, and sacrifice in modern storytelling. His one-eyed visage, accompanied by ravens, appears in novels, movies, and symbolic imagery. His pursuit of knowledge at any cost reflects the human desire to understand the mysteries of existence, even when the answers demand tremendous sacrifice. His leadership over Asgard in the face of inevitable doom has inspired countless depictions of rulers who remain steadfast in the face of overwhelming odds. Thor, perhaps the most widely recognized Norse god today, has become a global icon. In modern interpretations, particularly in popular movies and comic books, he is portrayed as a heroic figure whose thunderous strength protects the realms from evil. While these portrayals take creative liberties, they retain the essence of Thor's role as a defender, a symbol of courage, and a being connected deeply to both power and responsibility. His battles with the serpent Jormungandr have inspired imagery that ranges from epic artwork to dramatic storytelling in games and entertainment media. Loki, too, has captivated modern audiences. His duality, part trickster, part villain, part anti-hero, resonates strongly in contemporary culture where characters with complex motivations are celebrated. His charm, intelligence, unpredictability, and capacity for both mischief and destruction make him one of the most compelling figures in Norse mythology. Many interpretations explore the psychological dimensions of his motives, his relationship with the gods, and his ultimate role in the cycle of creation and destruction. The monstrous children of Loki, Fenrir, Jormungandr, and Hel, continue to appear in contemporary works as symbols of chaos, fear, and the inevitability of fate. Fenrir, in particular, has become a powerful emblem of primal strength and rebellion, often portrayed as an unstoppable force destined to break free from imposed constraints. Jormungandr's imagery as a world-encircling serpent speaks to themes of balance, danger, and cosmic scale. Hel's dual nature, half alive and half dead, inspires depictions of death that blend solemnity with power. Even Ragnarok itself has become a symbol in modern storytelling. It represents not only an ending but a transformation. Many contemporary narratives, from fantasy novels to science fiction epics, borrow the idea of a world-ending event that paves the way for renewal. This concept resonates because it mirrors the human understanding of cycles, be they personal, societal, or natural. The idea that destruction can lead to rebirth appeals to audiences who recognize that endings often create the foundation for new beginnings. The Norse creation myth also influences video games, where gods, giants, and mythical beasts appear as characters, enemies, or symbolic elements. Games that explore Norse settings incorporate Yggdrasil as a central motif, guiding players through worlds interconnected by the Great Tree. Weapons like Mjolnir and Gungnir appear as powerful artifacts, and characters like Odin, Thor, and Freyr take on new forms while remaining rooted in their mythological origins. These interpretations allow modern audiences to engage with the myths in interactive ways, blending tradition with innovation. Beyond entertainment, the themes of the Norse creation cycle resonate with modern philosophical questions. The myths explore ideas of fate, free will, sacrifice, chaos, order, and the cyclical nature of time, concepts that continue to fascinate thinkers, scholars, and spiritual seekers. The idea that the universe moves in cycles, that destruction is part of creation, and that even gods must submit to destiny raises questions relevant to science, philosophy, and everyday life. Fate, or Wird, plays a central role in Norse mythology. The belief that destiny is woven by forces beyond even the gods speaks to human experiences of inevitability and limitation. It reflects the challenges individuals face in confronting situations they cannot control. Yet within this belief lies a paradox that resonates today: even if fate cannot be changed, one can choose how to meet it. The gods knew they would fall in Ragnarok, yet they went to battle willingly, courageously, and without hesitation. This idea, that honor comes not from victory but from how one confronts adversity, holds deep relevance in modern society. Sacrifice, too, remains a potent theme. Odin's willingness to give up his eye for wisdom and to hang himself on Yggdrasil to gain knowledge of the runes symbolizes the price of learning and growth. It reflects the idea that meaningful understanding often comes at personal cost. In a world where individuals seek purpose and self-improvement, these myths remind us that wisdom requires perseverance, struggle, and sometimes pain. The balance between chaos and order, embodied by the constant tension between gods and giants, echoes through countless modern narratives. Chaos is portrayed not as evil but as a natural force, one that challenges structure and compels change. Order is necessary to maintain stability, but rigidity can lead to stagnation. The interplay between these forces reflects the human experience of navigating unpredictability while striving for harmony. Even the idea of rebirth after destruction carries a powerful message. The Norse believed that from the ashes of the old world, a new one would rise brighter and purer. This theme resonates in times of personal hardship, societal upheaval, or global crisis. It offers hope that even when everything seems lost, renewal is possible. As the story of the Norse creation cycle moves inward, from cosmic forces to personal reflection, it becomes clear why these myths endure. They offer more than entertainment. They offer perspective. They remind people of the power of resilience, the importance of courage, the inevitability of change, and the potential for growth hidden within even the darkest moments. The world of the Norse gods was filled with conflict, challenge, and uncertainty. Yet it was also filled with joy, beauty, loyalty, and love. These contrasts reflect the complexity of life itself. The gods were not perfect. They made mistakes, experienced loss, struggled with fear, and faced consequences. This made them relatable to the Norse people, who understood that life was rarely simple or predictable. In our modern world, the same truths remain. People still grapple with challenges beyond their control. They still seek wisdom, courage, and meaning. They still face moments that feel like personal Ragnarok, times when everything seems to fall apart. And like the myths, life often reveals that after destruction comes renewal, after hardship comes growth, and after darkness comes light. The story of creation from Ginnungagap to Ragnarok is not merely a myth about gods and monsters. It is a story about the human experience. It tells of beginnings born from impossible circumstances, of conflicts that shape identity, of sacrifices that define character, and of endings that make room for new beginnings. It is a story that mirrors the cycles each person lives through, cycles of hope, struggle, loss, and rebirth. It is this timeless relevance that keeps the Norse creation myth alive in hearts and minds across the world. As the centuries unfolded after the rebirth of the world, the story of the Norse creation cycle continued to echo across ages, cultures, and imaginations. It endured not because it was a relic of the past but because it carried truths that resonated deeply with every generation. To understand these myths fully, one must look beyond the surface of gods and giants, beyond battles and prophecies, and into the deeper layers of symbolism woven into each chapter of the cosmic saga. At its core, the Norse creation story is an exploration of opposites. From the very beginning, creation emerges from the meeting of fire and ice, extreme forces that collide in the vast emptiness of Ginnungagap. This union of opposites symbolizes the idea that life and existence arise not from harmony alone but from tension, conflict, and a balance between contrasting powers. The Norse understood that the world is shaped by contradictions, warmth and cold, darkness and light, growth and decay. These forces were not enemies but partners in the eternal dance of creation. Ymir, the primordial giant born from this mixture of fire and ice, represents chaos in its earliest form. His body, vast and unshaped, embodied the raw material from which the gods carved order. His sacrifice, necessary for the creation of the world, shows that destruction can be foundational, not final. Something must fall apart for something new to rise. This theme is repeated throughout Norse mythology, where endings are never truly endings. Even the death of the gods in Ragnarok was not a final collapse but a turning of the cosmic wheel. Odin's role in shaping the world reflects the Norse belief in the necessity of leadership grounded in wisdom. His sacrifices, though extreme, symbolize the quest for understanding. To the Norse, wisdom was not granted freely. It required commitment, struggle, and a willingness to endure pain. Odin's self-inflicted wound as he hung on Yggdrasil, denying himself food and drink, represents the idea that insight often comes only through hardship. His sacrifice of an eye for knowledge from Mimir's well reflects the belief that true understanding demands losing something precious. Thor's stories illuminate the values of protection and responsibility. Though he is often portrayed as a god of strength and storms, Thor's deeper symbolism lies in his unwavering commitment to shielding humanity and the gods from the forces of chaos. His battles with giants and creatures like Jormungandr symbolize the daily struggle to maintain order in a world constantly threatened by unpredictable forces. Thor embodies the spirit of action, reminding people that protection requires effort, vigilance, and courage. Loki's presence introduces another essential theme: the complexity of chaos. Loki is neither a simple villain nor a hero. He is both helper and destroyer, friend and enemy, creative genius and source of calamity. His unpredictable nature shows that chaos is not always malevolent. Sometimes it sparks new ideas, challenges stagnation, and propels change. But unchecked, it becomes dangerous, capable of unraveling even the strongest threads of existence. The Norse recognized that chaos is part of life, whether in nature or in human behavior. Loki personifies this truth, reminding people that unpredictability must be acknowledged, respected, and balanced. The death of Baldr carries profound symbolic weight. Baldr represents purity, beauty, innocence, and the ephemeral nature of perfection. His death at the hands of his blind brother Hodr, manipulated by Loki, shows how fragile goodness can be in the face of deceit and misunderstanding. It also marks the moment when the balance of the cosmos shifts irrevocably toward destruction. Baldr's story reflects the idea that even the brightest moments contain seeds of sorrow, and even the most beloved beings are vulnerable to fate. Fate itself is one of the most powerful themes in the Norse creation myth. Unlike many other mythologies where gods wield absolute control, the Norse believed that even their gods were bound by the threads woven by the Norns. The Norns represent destiny not as something cruel or kind but as a force beyond judgment, simply a fact of existence. Their weaving of fate speaks to the Norse acceptance of life's unpredictability and the belief that one's worth comes from how they face their destiny, not from whether they succeed or fail. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, stands as one of the most poignant symbols in world mythology. It is not a story of defeat but a story of fulfillment. The gods knew their end was inevitable, yet they faced it bravely. Odin rode to battle despite knowing he would fall to Fenrir. Thor confronted Jormungandr even though he understood the serpent's poison would claim his life. Freyr faced Surt without his magical sword, accepting the consequence of his earlier choice. Tyr fought Garm knowing neither would survive. Heimdall battled Loki despite their intertwined destinies. These stories emphasize bravery, loyalty, and duty in the face of certainty. The gods did not seek to escape their fate. They sought to meet it with honor. This theme resonated deeply with the Norse people, who lived in harsh environments and faced many hardships they could not control. The myth reassured them that courage mattered more than victory and that facing adversity with strength was a form of triumph all its own. The rebirth that followed Ragnarok carries a message of hope. Lif and Liftrazr, the two humans who survive and repopulate the world, symbolize resilience. Life endures even after unimaginable destruction. Baldr's return symbolizes forgiveness, healing, and renewal. The surviving god stepping into a new world reflects the idea that wisdom survives through cycles of loss and rebirth. The new sun born from the old speaks to continuity, showing that though everything changes, some essence remains. This cyclical worldview has deeply influenced how people interpret the Norse creation myth today. Modern audiences relate to the idea that life moves through stages, that endings are often beginnings in disguise, and that destruction can clear the way for transformation. People recognize their own struggles in the gods' battles, their own losses in the fall of Asgard, and their own hopes in the renewal of the world that follows. These themes extend naturally into discussions of psychology, spirituality, and personal growth. Odin's self-sacrifice can be seen as a metaphor for introspection, the willingness to undergo inner pain to gain wisdom. Thor's battles represent personal challenges and the fight against forces that threaten one's stability. Loki's stories reflect internal conflicts, impulses, and the duality within each person. Ragnarok symbolizes the collapse of old beliefs, habits, or circumstances to make room for new growth. In literature, the Norse creation cycle has influenced countless works. Writers such as J.R.R. Tolkien drew heavily from Norse mythology when crafting Middle-earth. The dwarves, elves, runes, and even the name Gandalf trace their roots to Norse legends. The idea of a world shaped by cosmic conflict and destined to move through cycles of destruction and renewal appears in many fantasy epics. The imagery of a great serpent encircling the world, of a divine hammer that protects the innocent, and of gods who embody both power and vulnerability continues to inspire storytelling today. In film and television, the Norse gods have been reimagined in diverse ways. Some adaptations present them as literal deities, while others interpret them symbolically or weave their mythology into modern settings. These portrayals often highlight the dramatic tension between divine responsibility and personal desire, echoing ancient themes while exploring contemporary concerns. In visual art, the Norse myths have inspired intricate carvings, detailed illustrations, and striking interpretations. Artists are drawn to the dramatic contrasts of the stories, the cosmic fires of Muspelheim, the icy reaches of Niflheim, the majestic halls of Asgard, the serpentine coils of Jormungandr, the towering presence of Yggdrasil. The imagery is vivid, raw, and powerful, lending itself naturally to artistic expression. Video games, too, have become prominent interpreters of Norse creation myths. Players encounter gods, giants, dwarves, and mythical beasts, engage in battles inspired by ancient epics, and explore realms envisioned through the lens of the old sagas. These games allow modern audiences to experience aspects of the myth firsthand, making choices and facing challenges that mirror the themes of sacrifice, heroism, and destiny. Even outside entertainment, Norse mythology speaks to people navigating a rapidly changing world. The idea that stability and chaos exist in constant tension mirrors the uncertainty of modern life. People lose jobs, relationships change, societies evolve, and individuals face challenges that feel like personal Ragnarok. These myths remind them that though destruction is painful, it can lead to renewal. Though endings are difficult, they can open doors to new possibilities. Though storms rage, skies eventually clear. The myth also speaks to the human need for identity and belonging. The Norse saw themselves reflected in their gods, flawed, courageous, vulnerable, and complex. In a world where individuals often struggle with self-doubt, responsibility, and the desire for purpose, these myths offer reassurance that even the mightiest beings wrestle with uncertainty. Within all these interpretations lies a deeper truth. The Norse creation myth endures because it captures something essential about the human experience. It acknowledges the beauty and brutality of existence, the constant interplay between creation and destruction, the fragility of life, and the strength found in resilience. It reminds us that wisdom must be earned, that courage is meaningful even in the face of defeat, and that hope remains even after everything falls apart. As the story of the Norse cosmos reaches toward its conclusion, the myths return to the core idea that began it all, the cycle. Ginnungagap, the empty void, gave rise to worlds. Ymir's sacrifice created the foundations of existence. The gods shaped order from chaos. Loki introduced unpredictability. Baldr's death signaled the unraveling. Ragnarok tore everything apart. And from the ashes, a new world rose. This cycle mirrors the cycles of life that every person experiences, from childhood to adulthood, through challenges and triumphs, through loss and renewal. The Norse understood that life does not follow a straight line. It moves in spirals, loops, and cycles, each stage connected to the next, each ending preparing the way for a new beginning. This is why the Norse creation myth continues to resonate across cultures, across time, and across the hearts of those who read or hear it. It speaks to the universal truths that bind humanity together. It reminds us that even when the world seems dark, dawn eventually follows. That even when everything collapses, new life emerges. That even when we fall, we can rise again. And in the vastness of this myth, in its gods and monsters, its fires and oceans, its battles and rebirths, humanity finds a mirror, reflecting strength, vulnerability, resilience, and the enduring belief that hope is never lost. As the story of the Norse creation cycle reaches its final arc, the echoes of the old world linger like distant thunder, reminding all who listen that myth is not a relic but a living reflection of the human spirit. What began in the quiet emptiness of Ginnungagap could not truly end, even after the fires of Surt and the collapse of the Nine Realms. The universe renewed itself, humanity persisted, and the surviving gods walked into a dawn shaped by both memory and possibility. Yet to understand why this story endures, one must look not only at what happened but at what it means. The Norse people lived in lands where the natural cycles were dramatic and unforgiving. Long winters pressed harshly against their homes, demanding resourcefulness and strength. Summers came briefly, bursting with life and light. Storms swept across oceans, reshaping coastlines and scattering ships. Nature could nurture and destroy with equal intensity. These experiences shaped their worldview, giving rise to a mythology that embraced contrast, uncertainty, and resilience. Their creation myth reflects those values, grounding cosmic events in themes familiar to anyone who has braved hardship or sought meaning in change. For them, the world was never stable. It was always becoming. The gods themselves were not immortal in spirit alone, they grew, learned, made mistakes, faced consequences, and struggled with destiny. This made them relatable. Their stories were mirrors held up to human life. The gods might have wielded weapons forged by dwarves or walked across rainbow bridges, but the emotions they carried, love, loss, ambition, fear, hope, and courage, were deeply human. Odin's hunger for wisdom speaks to every person who has sought understanding beyond what is easily grasped. His sacrifices teach that knowledge is not simply acquired but earned through effort and sometimes pain. Thor's relentless defense of the weak shows that true strength is measured not in power but in how it is used. Freyr's love reveals that choices of the heart carry weight that destiny may one day call upon. Loki's unpredictable nature reminds people of the parts of themselves that can help or harm, depending on how they are guided. And Baldr's death signifies how vulnerable beauty and goodness can be in a world full of uncertainty. The myth also acknowledges the inevitability of endings. The Norse did not shy away from the reality that all things eventually pass. They confronted it head-on, understanding that endings are part of life's natural rhythm. Ragnarok reflects this acceptance. It is not an event to be feared but one to be met with bravery. Even the gods, knowing they would fall, chose to face their destiny with honor. This reflects a powerful message: the worth of a life is not measured by how long it avoids death, but by how courageously it stands in its presence. Yet the myth does not leave the world in ruin. After the destruction comes renewal. After despair comes hope. This cyclical nature mirrors the rhythm of seasons, the rise and fall of civilizations, and the personal journeys that individuals experience throughout their lives. People face their own forms of Ragnarok, moments when everything they know falls apart. But these stories remind them that from such endings can arise new beginnings, new strengths, and new paths forward. The reborn world, green and gentle, symbolizes the belief that no matter how great the destruction, life has a way of returning. The survival of Lif and Lifthrasir represents humanity's resilience. Their emergence from Yggdrasil's shelter echoes the idea that in times of greatest darkness, life hides, waits, gathers strength, and eventually steps out again into the light. The return of Baldr signifies the restoration of joy and wisdom. His presence in the new age ensures that the mistakes of the past need not define the future. The surviving gods, carrying both the memory of loss and the promise of renewal, reflect the journey from grief to acceptance and from sorrow to hope. Through these stories, the Norse creation myth teaches that meaning is not found in avoiding hardship but in how one endures it. Life's challenges do not nullify its beauty, they sharpen it. The winters of existence make its springs more precious. The trials make the triumphs sweeter. The destruction makes the rebirth more profound. This myth also tells us that the world is not governed solely by order or chaos. It is shaped by the balance of both. Fire and ice, gods and giants, creation and destruction, fate and choice, all coexist and contribute to the universe's unfolding. The Norse understood that removing chaos entirely would lead to stagnation, while removing order would lead to ruin. Their stories reflect the wisdom that harmony arises not from eliminating opposing forces but from balancing them. Modern readers and listeners find meaning in these lessons because they transcend time. The myth's emotional and philosophical depth makes it universal. Whether one lives in a world of fjords and forests or in bustling cities far removed from Viking landscapes, the themes of resilience, courage, sacrifice, and renewal resonate. People still seek wisdom through struggle, still face internal and external battles, still experience moments of darkness, and still move toward new beginnings. In contemporary culture, the Norse myth continues to inspire in countless ways. Writers craft worlds rooted in the mythical nine realms. Filmmakers depict gods who grapple with responsibility and loss. Musicians incorporate themes of fate and rebirth into their art. Scholars study the intricacies of the myths to understand ancient beliefs, social structures, and storytelling traditions. Even those with little knowledge of Norse culture recognize symbols like Mjolnir, Yggdrasil, and Ragnarok because these images speak to something embedded in the human psyche. Beyond entertainment and academic study, the myth serves as a guide for personal reflection. It encourages individuals to face challenges directly, to seek knowledge even when it requires sacrifice, to accept that change is inevitable, and to trust that renewal follows destruction. It teaches that courage is not the absence of fear but the willingness to act despite it. It shows that we can rebuild even after profound loss. The rebirth after Ragnarok offers a vision of hope rooted not in denial of suffering but in understanding its place within the greater cycle of existence. It reminds us that even when the world feels like it is falling apart, there is potential hidden within the ruins. From ashes, forests can grow. From silence, songs can rise. From endings, new stories can begin.